From some forgotten wonders to the virtually obscure, we're going to be talking about 13 bands and musicians that you may not have heard of from Canada, coming up on the next installment of Northern Vinyl Guy. Hello everyone, Daryl the Northern Vinyl Guy coming back at you with another video, and as mentioned in the introduction, I will be featuring 13 Canadian bands and musicians that you may have never heard of. Some of these are virtually obscure. Looking at them on Discogs, there's either none for sale, or if they are for sale, some of them are going for $85, $100 Canadian. And then others were a little more successful and a little more famous, and I'll get to those as we go through. I'm going to be doing these in alphabetical order, by last name or by band name. And yeah, so I hope that you enjoy this. I hope that you get something out of it. And if just a little forewarning here, a lot of these bands and musicians are more in the, I would say, folk, country, I guess Americana Sam, we might call some of them Americana to a degree, or Canadiana music. So that might be a reason why some of them are a little more obscure. And so what I'd like to do is I'm going to get into this, starting with the letter B, and then we will work our way down to the end. So we're going to start this off with a musician who actually started his career as a musician by winning a Battle of the Bands back in 1971. And prior to becoming, he was probably, out of all of these musicians that I'm going to be going over today and covering, probably the most popular, I guess, from a Canadian perspective. If you have not heard of Ray Forbes, you may know him as Bim. He was a successful musician, specifically in the 1970s, early 1980s, even opening for bands like Supertramp and Santana. And so I have two of his albums. I'm going to show one of them. The other one's not clean. It's not organized as of yet. And that is Bim's Thistles album. And this one's on the Casino record label, which you don't see too often, but it's my green Casino label. And on the back side here, you can see him as an artist and some of the tracks here that are on there. Tender Lullaby and a few others that are on here. He's, like I said, he is more of a folky kind of music. Later on, he started recording, specifically in 1987, under the name Ray Forbes, which is his biological birth name. And he takes a little bit of getting used to. It's taken me multiple spins. At one point in time, I had considered actually getting rid of this Thistles album. But there's some great songs, specifically on side one: Tender Lullaby, Right After My Heart, Waiting for You, Mama, Shell of a Life, and Night on a Hill. And so, yeah, if you are interested, I guess, in more Canadian folky, and this one here, this Thistles album, is definitely on, not folky in the country sense, but folky kind of in a folk rock, I guess you would call it. His voice definitely, at least for my taste, takes a little bit of getting used to, but I thought I would feature him here. If you've listened to Canadian music from the 70s through to the 90s, you've probably heard of Bim. But if you are from other parts of the world and you want to get yourself some Canadian folk rocky kind of stuff, check Thistles out. It's a great album, and like to hear your thoughts on that one. Starting in the 1970s, specifically the early 1970s, and ending in the late 1980s, there used to be a Canadian record label known as Snowcan Records out of the Ottawa Valley area. And it was started by a gentleman to try to focus on more, I guess, independent Canadian country, folk, and bluegrass musicians. And one of the more popular ones that came out of this record label, and I'll be actually featuring another Snowcan label later on in this episode, was the country musician Don Cochran. And if memory serves me right, he's from Kingston, Ontario, I think. Yes, he was out of Kingston, Ontario, and so he got on board with this particular label. And I mean, it's very, very simple stuff. A lot of these Snowcan records would have a picture of the musician or some kind of a nature thing that's on it, and just a simple background with some information, say, about the singer or whatnot. And then, of course, the label here at the top corner. And then, of course, the tracks that are here. Now, Don Cochran is a musician, a lot of Canadian themes. One of the popular songs off of this is a self-titled, I think it might be the debut album by him. Anyway, there's a song on here called Manitoba, and another one called Old Man from Saskatchewan. Talks about Canadian provinces, different towns and cities from across Canada. Now, as noted, Don Cochran was from Kingston, Ontario, and in 2005, he was inducted into the Ottawa Country Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Strangely enough, by the late 1970s, probably 79, 1980-ish, he actually had stopped recording music altogether for a period of just over 30 years, so just prior to him being inducted into the Ottawa Hall of Fame. And then in the early 2000s began recording music again, and I think he is still recording music today. But you should check him out. Definitely got some, if you're really into the Canadian country, the song, like I said, the song Manitoba did make the Canadian RPM charts. So if you have heard of Don Cochran or you are a fan, please let me know down in the comments below. This is a really cool record, though. If you have a chance to get a hold of this one, his debut album, check out some Don Cochran from Kingston, Ontario. All right, so going from some country and folk and bluegrassish kind of music, we're going to be moving on to the genre of disco music. In 1978, there was a duo of co-producers by the names of, I think it was, Pete DeMilo and George Cucuzella. And they formed the duo of the Erotic Drum Band. I've got the my campsites that I was going to try to book for this summer. I've got them on a sticky tab, but I've put it there because I don't think that section of the album is probably appropriate for YouTube. But anyway, Erotic Drum Band, a disco duo from Canada, and a couple of hits on here in the late 1970s with Love Disco Style and Plug Me to Death. Now, of course, this was coming out at a time when disco was pretty much dead. By 1979, disco as a genre was pretty much gone. But they did make their move in Canada on the disco scene, and this is on a green Unidisc label. But yeah, kind of an unusual duo. They're still listed as active according to Google, but I haven't heard anything of them lately. Now, in the early 1980s, they were still performing kind of the club style music, playing and performing in clubs and all that kind of stuff. And they did take they almost pretty much ripped off M's pop music by doing a song later on of theirs called, I think it was like Pop Pop Doo-Wah or something like that. I can't remember what the name of it is, but just the tail off of that whole disco style. So if this is appealing to you, I did listen to this again today just to check it out. Very plain background here 4 tracks on this particular album. There's a couple of albums they did after that. But by the late 1980s, they were not making albums and stuff like that, or at least not in full. If disco music is something that appeals to you, I am sure that you might be able to stream that one off of YouTube and or Spotify. I didn't check out to see if you could, but I'm sure that it is there somewhere. So if that is your thing, check out the Erotic Drum Band. Now, this next musician that I'm going to feature was born in the 1940s, and in 1971 he emigrated to Canada from the U.S. state of Maryland. And as the story goes, he was crossing over, I believe, at the Niagara Falls border, I think it was, coming into Ontario during a major snowstorm. And he had a conversation with the customs officer at the time as to why he was coming to Canada. And he just kind of stated that he was a aspiring musician coming to Canada. And the customs officer basically said, if you're crazy enough to come over in this storm, this kind of weather, then you are a glorified Canadian. Now, by 1978, he had obtained his Canadian citizenship and has since remained in Canada, currently recording even music at his recording studio in British Columbia. Now, he's been living in New Westminster, BC, I believe it is, since the 1970s. And he started his own record label called Woodshed Records, and that is Dave Essig. Now, I have what's the name of this album? Redbird Country, which is straight up country music, but definitely that Americana style music. And this was the first recorded record on his Woodshed record label. Right there, you got the WR, Woodshed record label. Now, this is straight up folky country. There's no denying the twang. Of course, the cemetery on the back there, and there he is on the back cover. But this is some definitely unique stuff. Once again, it's kind of like I was mentioning about Bim when I was talking about him, is this album here has taken me multiple listens, this Redbird Country, to get kind of used to get used to the feel. If you're not into the country folk music, you're probably not going to like this. But if this is your jam, I would definitely go with this. The song The Old Account, Candyman is a great song. Lonesome Vigil, and Circus Song to finish off side A. Side A to me is the stronger side, and it says that this was recorded in Elmsdale, Ontario, but he now has his studio in British Columbia, as I mentioned. Now, speaking of musicians that come from the province of British Columbia, we've got a little bit of Don Freed and his Pith and Pathos album here. Once again, he's probably a little more famous than some people might give him credit for. If you haven't heard of him, he's, out of all the musicians here that I'm featuring today, probably has the most albums that were recorded. And on the backside here of this Pith and Pathos, you got the lyrics. Now, he is definitely a country folk musician, but at the same time, there's some comedic twist. You could almost say, like, if you are familiar with the Arrogant Worms, I'm not saying that it's 100% that style, but kind of reminds me of the Arrogant Worms to a degree. And not sure exactly the history behind him and his music, but a lot of his topics, that he features in these lyrics are definitely, by today's standards, would be important, heavy topics to discuss, heavy topics to write songs about. Back in the early 1980s, definitely would be some taboo topics, including things like pregnancy, teenage pregnancy, abortion, real estate, and the collapse of the economy, and also things like mining and environmental pollution and things like that are all in his lyrics. So to kind of give you some ideas here, there's a song called Landscapes, and I think that Pith and Pathos, based on what I'm seeing here, I believe this might be a greatest hits or compilation album, but 1974, we get Landscapes. Little Wendy Jones, Innocent and Sweet, she got pregnant from a toilet seat, had an abortion in a laundromat, right? I mean, that's pretty touchy subject, but then at the same time, you've got some comedic effect with the Alberta Tarzans. You know, we're the Alberta Tarzans. You can hear our fearsome call, and there's some weird noises going on in the background. It's only like a 50-second song. And then you've got the humorous Pregnant with Myself. Don't want to go out drinking with the guys. I don't want cigarette smoke in my lungs and my eyes. I got to take good care of me to avoid a tragedy. I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. So you got that, and then we got uranium, which is once again dealing with politics and environment. You know, if and of course other forms of politics. You know, if the Russians want to start wars, we'll tell all the Doukhobors, don't look so gall darn glum. There's very unique lyrics, but with a little comedic effect. So as I mentioned, kind of in the vein of the Arrogant Worms, I guess, so to speak. I'm not saying that it's fully to that degree, but if you are into that style of music, Don Freed, I would check out Pith and Pathos, because I believe this is a compilation album based on what I'm seeing here. Different songs that he's recorded in different years. So give it a go. As this video is kind of getting a little bit lengthy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into 2 parts. And so I'm going to show you one last album, which will bring us to album number 6 of this obscure and, you know, somewhat forgotten musicians from Canada. So I'm going to show a jazz band this time. And I got this as part of a collection that somebody had sent me of about, 20 or 30 records. They were just looking to try to get rid of it, so I just paid for the shipping to get it here. And that is the Fig Leaf Band, or the Fig Leaf Jazz Band. And this is their Fig Leaf Rising from the late 1970s. Now, the Fig Jazz Band is out of Toronto, Ontario. And at one point in time, there were just a bunch of teachers, or not a bunch of teachers, but some of them were teachers, and they didn't really take their music all that seriously, but then they ended up recording some stuff. And by the early 1980s, they were releasing albums, and in my opinion, this kind of music is like 1940s swing music, but it's got a bit of a jazzy kind of a twist, and very interesting stuff. If you're not into jazz music, but you're kind of, I don't know, wanting to check some quirky stuff out, I would give this one a go. Very unique band to kind of, like I said, finish this episode off. There's not a ton of information about these guys. There's one website online, kind of gives a biography of all the different band members and whatnot, but I believe that they were performing up until at least the early 2000s. I'm not sure if they're still performing today, but give these guys a go. It's a seven-man band. Everything from vocals to trombones, trumpets, drums. Very cool stuff. I was digging this. Once again, I've been listening to a lot of music today just to get this video on the go, and but I would check this out. Cool stuff if you're into that jazzy swing, 1940s mixed in with a 1980s twist. Give her a go. So as I mentioned, I'm going to break this down into 2 separate videos. And so I hope that you enjoyed this first one, as we are almost getting to the 20-minute mark here of the video. I don't want to extend it any longer than that. I'm sure you guys don't want to be watching a 40-minute straight video, but if you do, let me know in the comments section below, which brings me to my last point there. If you have got this far and you are a new viewer to my channel and you like what I've got to offer, you'll leave some comments down in the section below. Please leave some thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. If you are a continuing viewer, I appreciate your support and hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know, have you heard of any of these 6 bands and musicians? If so, which ones? What are your thoughts about them? If not, which ones would you like to hear? I think all of these are available on Discogs or in the wild. Some of them may be a little obscure, but yeah, give it a go and let me know your thoughts. We will see you in part 2 of the next one. Take care, everyone.